Disciplining a child with a mood disorder, which includes diagnoses such as DMDD, depression, bipolar disorder, and fear of harm, is much more complicated than most people think. Chronic irritability is a defining symptom in children and teens of depression, mania, and anxiety. This means that the argumentative, quick tempered, defiant, and oppositional behaviors the irritability causes are often mistaken for intentional and willful choices on the part of the child, and the impulse is to discipline those behaviors in order to make them stop. But traditional discipline doesn't work because these behaviors are not willful choices. They are symptoms of an illness, and those strategies not only don't usually work, they often make things worse by triggering additional symptoms, increasing the irritability, and making the child feel isolated and misunderstood. Attempts you've made in the past to discipline have probably been unsuccessful and have left you feeling hopeless and helpless. Worse, you've probably spent many hours listening to people who have no idea what your life is like tell you how you're supposed to parent. This likely left you feeling frustrated, isolated, helpless, and filled with self doubt. But we know you've done everything you could think of to help your child. In our community, we call ourselves the No Stone Unturned Club. You probably tried variations of tough love, empathy, strict consequences, ignoring behaviors you want to end, or you may have even tried spanking. You've tried timeouts, reward charts, and threats of punishment. You've tried anything and everything anyone has suggested, every technique you read about online or in a book, every idea instructed by healthcare providers, teachers, and therapists. In the end, some of these strategies, not to mention the countless others we haven't mentioned, may have worked for a little while, a day, a week, maybe even as long as a month. But in the end, the wheels would come off the cart again, and you'd find yourself in a battle of wills with a child who you secretly suspected wasn't even in control of their actions. If you were lucky, these battles took place in the privacy of your own home, away from judgmental eyes. But more likely than not, these battles took place in public, at the playground, in the classroom, the doctor's office, even maybe on Thanksgiving Day with the whole extended family watching. In the end, your attempts to keep the peace and maintain discipline have been thwarted by one simple idea. You cannot parent, discipline, punish, or reward away symptoms. But the impact of mental illnesses are not that different from the impacts of physical illnesses. We know that we can't stop a cut from bleeding by reasoning with it. We can't stop low blood sugar by taking away device time. We can't end an asthma attack by yelling at it. And we can't prevent a runny nose by promising a special treat. But nearly every recommendation we're given to manage our children's psychiatric symptoms focus on behavior modification instead of symptom management. We're told that the child is being defiant intentionally, that they're being rude, difficult, or disrespectful, or just seeking attention. We're told that if we don't put a stop to this, the child's behavior will continue to escalate and that the parents are responsible for the child's actions. But none of this could be further from the truth when the problematic behaviors are the result of active symptoms of a psychiatric condition that has its roots in a biological dysfunction in the brain. Imagine telling a person whose legs are paralyzed that they should stop being lazy and just get up and walk. That's a horrifying idea, right? Well, it's not entirely dissimilar from telling a person who's having a panic attack to stop being difficult and just relax. Or telling a child with a thermoregulatory problem, as in the case of fear of harm, to stop being defiant and just put on their winter coat. In order to begin to manage symptoms, discipline effectively, and help our children learn to manage independently, we have to shift our thinking in a few areas. First, we must learn to tell the difference between symptoms and misbehaving. Second, we need to evolve our thinking on what discipline is. And third, we have to accept that there are no magic answers that will work every time. None of these are easy to do, and we need a lot of reminding from our peers, which is why support groups are so useful in that they give us an opportunity to have these perspective shifts reinforced. Before children with mood disorders get properly diagnosed and treated, they aren't mood stable, and their behavior is the most difficult to manage, which in turn makes discipline extremely difficult. Once they're on the road to recovery, discipline becomes easier, and some traditional techniques may periodically be employed, but we'll always need to take into account the degree to which discipline can trigger symptoms. Now, item number one on this list is addressed in its own video called Is It Misbehavior or a Symptom? So we'll move on here to discuss item number two, which is what is discipline really? Most people, when asked, would say that discipline is the same thing as punishment, but this isn't really the case. The goal of discipline is actually to teach and train new, more desirable behaviors. Some people may still think that punishment is a good way to get to new behaviors, but psychologists have known for a very long time that punishment is totally ineffective at teaching new behaviors because all it does is show what the authority figure doesn't want you to do, but it doesn't show what they do want you to do. When we shift our thinking about discipline towards the idea of it as a process to teach desirable behaviors, the role of a disciplinarian changes along with it. Disciplinarians are not responsible for punishing. They're responsible for teaching and guiding new behaviors. This requires a calm, unemotional, and steady demeanor during the chaos of problematic behaviors from the child or teen. Recognizing and accepting that problematic behaviors are involuntary or symptom driven and not personally intended to push our buttons goes a long way to help us maintain ourselves as disciplinarians who teach rather than disciplinarians who punish. The next difficult perspective shift is accepting that there isn't a magic wand in terms of discipline, which can be hard to wrap our minds around when parents and caregivers are constantly told to be consistent. But the truth is that not every intervention will work with every child, or will they work every time it's used. Effective discipline is sometimes less about knowing what to do when, as it is about knowing what not to do when. This may seem overwhelming, but we can share with you some basic guidelines related to how to discipline effectively with a mood disorder. First and foremost, as we've said before, disciplining symptoms is pointless. Disciplining children and teens for things they have no control over simply can't result in any improvement. What we can do is try our best to recognize when problematic behavior is symptom driven. Again, you can watch the video called Is It Misbehavior or a Symptom for more details on this. The next guideline is that it's usually best not to discipline in the moment. Many behavioral strategies dictate that problematic behaviors must be dealt with immediately. The reasoning behind this is simple. A delay between the action and the discipline can make it difficult for the child or teen to connect the two. This may be sound logic for neurotypical folks. However, for a child or teen with a mood disorder, it is not that simple. The person with the mood disorder may be experiencing a heightened stress response, a misperception of the level of threat in the environment, or a full-blown fight or flight response. Any attempt to call out problematic behavior in the moment will likely escalate the conflict and will absolutely not help the child or teen learn how to make a different choice next time. If it seems likely that immediate discipline could escalate things, simply letting the child know you acknowledge their difficulty, are there to help, and still care for them is often sufficient for an in the moment intervention. Examples include, you know this behavior isn't acceptable, and I can help you make a different choice when you're ready. Or, hurting someone else because you're angry isn't acceptable, and you'll be unhappy later that you're doing this. Or, it's okay that you're angry or afraid, but this is not an acceptable way to behave when you're feeling this way. Or, it's not okay for you to treat other people this way, and the kind person you are doesn't want to behave this way. These statements communicate that you're not willing to tolerate the behavior, but are remaining compassionate towards the child and what they're going through. These simple messages seep through the overwhelming feelings, and later, when the person is calm and available emotionally, these statements can be used as a jumping off point for a supportive conversation about behaviors. The next strategy is to always avoid punishments that use embarrassment or humiliation as a tool. Sometimes, when behavioral infractions are small, parents or teachers will use the age old tool of calling out the behavior publicly to invoke some social pressure to behave. This is going to be the wrong strategy for use with a child with a mood disorder. While some neurotypical children may be able to handle this kind of spotlight being shown on them, children with mood disorders, and especially the fear of harm disorder, will experience this embarrassment as a humiliation, and in the case of fear of harm, a threat to their survival. Fear of being ostracized and excluded is triggered by embarrassment, as the child fears losing their status as part of the social group. And the thought of the impending isolation becomes too much to bear, triggering the full fight, flight, or freeze response. And honestly, do any of us, adults included, enjoy being embarrassed? Does it make us want to do better, or does it just make us defensive, angry, and hurt? Additionally, most children with mood disorders, bipolar disorder, or fear of harm have spent their lives being disciplined all the time for their symptoms, and as a result, do not have the self esteem, self confidence, and self assuredness to roll with this kind of intervention. It will invariably hurt their feelings, damage their self esteem, and make them less likely to reflect on their behavior because they've experienced it as victimizing. We also don't want to demand an apology or make forgiveness dependent on an apology. We all know that apologies that are required aren't real apologies. Being told we have to apologize is more likely to build resentment, anger, and feelings of distrust. Children with mood disorders are, when not symptomatic, often very sensitive and caring people who will feel bad after outbursts and want to apologize. Giving space and time for the child or teen to come to the conclusion that an apology is appropriate on their own will go a long way towards making that apology reflective of genuine remorse, as well as useful in behavior modification in the future. If the child needs a nudge in that direction, simply saying, you know, if I were in your situation, I'd apologize for hurting his feelings. That might be enough to encourage an apology. Next, once disciplined, the incident needs to be over, and there shouldn't be any ongoing emotional punishment. When we communicate anger or disappointment in our discipline, it often lingers, creating anxiety in the child that they are living under a proverbial rain cloud and have no control over when it will be lifted. This essentially keeps the punishment going long after it should have ended. A reset button that allows the emotional slate to be wiped clean for both the child and the adults in the situation helps to establish a clearly defined end to the discipline that might not otherwise be obvious to the child and allows them to feel accepted again and therefore safe. Along those same lines comes the next guideline to remember to meet the need the child is exhibiting with compassion and empathy. Remember, all behaviors serve a purpose. This means that when a child or teen acts out, even if it's not the result of a symptom, there's still a reason for it. Teaching disciplinarians work to figure out what that need is, identify it for the child, and help them find a better way to get that need met. Some people mistakenly view this as giving in to the child's demands or allowing yourself to be manipulated by the child. Trying to figure out what the child needs without judging that need and then fulfilling it will be one of the quickest ways to de escalate a problem, to reinforce that you are a trusted grown up, and to reduce the lingering effects of the outburst in the brain, which is essential for building new behavior patterns. People often use the phrase, that child is just looking for attention. But it stands to reason that if they're looking for attention, they must need attention for some reason. And just because we on the outside can't see what that reason is, doesn't mean it isn't valid. Saying to the child, your behavior is telling me you need some attention right now. Is that right? Maybe just what you need to start a conversation that helps the child understand themselves a little better. Now, you may not have the time to have that discussion in the moment. Maybe you're simultaneously on the phone trying to pack lunches, get out the door to school and work on time, and you can't respond. But you can respond by saying, I know you need attention right now, and I promise I will give it as soon as I can, but right now I need to be focusing on something different. This is a calmer, less emotional, but still reassuring response that is an improvement over, I've told you 100 times not to interrupt me when I'm on the phone, isn't it? Will this result in perfect behavior? No. But it will make you feel better about your attempts to redirect, and it will be more likely to be heard. Which leads us to the last item on this list of guides. Parents, caregivers, please forgive yourself when you fail at this. This is not said to be discouraging. There is little doubt parents will try these strategies whenever they are able. But the truth is that parents are people, and it is impossible to always remain calm, cool, and collected in the face of the chaos of symptomatic children, mood disorder symptoms, and your own inevitable exhaustion. You will do your best, and sometimes you will succeed and feel wonderful, and sometimes you will fail and feel terrible, and sometimes you won't have any idea if your intervention had any positive effect or not. But be kind to yourself. You're struggling through with a child who is struggling too, and mistakes will be made. But every moment is an opportunity to begin again, a reset button for you, if you will. Every day is a new chance to try again. And if you are kind to yourself, you'll also be showing your child that kindness towards oneself has value, has meaning, and has a place for everyone in your home.